Alright, Simon, this might be the most informal video that you ever see. I want to show you how to put together, or how I don't want to show you how to put, you probably already know a lot of this, but I want to show you how I put together a basic rack and how it would look, maybe a couple of my better templates at this point in time, one of my track templates. So what I'd like to demonstrate is how to set up a template, how my template might look from scratch, then share with you a couple of ways that I've done that. I'm opening up here with a screenshot of my grandchildren because I happen to like starting there. I opened a brand new, I created an empty template. First thing I'm going to do is, and you probably already know this, but I could tell you this took me forever to figure this out. Finally, some really good folks over there at Cinematic Orchestration got this through my head. Start by opening up a VST instrument, and I had just clicked on it, Devices, VST Instruments, or F11. Open up a rack, and for our purposes, I work with Contact a lot, so I'm opening up a Contact 5 instrument. It'll take it a few minutes to load, so I'm going to pause frequently and do some editing. I'm now looking at the screen. Do you want to create a MIDI track assigned to the plugin Contact 5? One of the reasons I chose Contact 5, it seems to give me more audio possibilities. For instance, if you get to 516, you can have 16 channels, it seemed like, in the 5.8 and so on and so forth, decreasing amounts of channels. I want as many channels as possible because I want one instance open to conserve some of my computer resources, which on this machine, I think perhaps maybe I have the fewest resources of any person using Cubase out there. So I'm going to hit Create. And notice my Contact 5 is sitting here. Now, my next step is I want to open my instrument rack in here first, or whatever instruments I want. Fortunately, I've saved a bunch already, so I'm going to load a recent one. I'm just going to hit the load button here because it'll probably have some stuff that I want. For instance, Joe's 64 wasn't bad. I think Joe's brass is okay. I'm going to run with that. I'm just going to say, hey, look, I want the whole schmear. Notice it's all being loaded in. Okay, my instruments are now officially loaded on screen, and you'll notice that I've taken the time to make sure that each one of these instruments is assigned to a certain track. Port A and MIDI channel 1. MIDI channel 2 for the trumpet long notes, MIDI channel 3 for the French horn solo notes, MIDI channel 4 for the second trumpet section notes. I could have organized these instruments a little bit better, but I mean, just for the sake of time, notice that they're all there. I go down to the batch configuration. I go down to batch functions. I click clear the output section, create one individual channel for each loaded instrument. And then as I look down here, I'm going to see something that's going to basically follow the same pattern as I have up above. Now that this is set, now that I have that part done, I'm going to go back to the devices here, and I'm going back to the VST instruments. And right here by Contact 5, where the arrow goes down, I now want to activate the outputs. Look at all those outputs that I have that I can put something on. at this point. Now, the names have been changed because guess what? I haven't figured this all out yet, but I figured out enough to be dangerous at least. I now have outputs that I can set up MIDI channels for and route those MIDI channels through those different outputs. And I like Contact 5 for that very reason. Look at all those outputs, man. We can really go to town with stuff now. Now, I have about 10 instruments that I have put in here at this point in time. All these outputs, I just need to match up some MIDI channels with those outputs. There's my instance of Contact, I think, is sitting down at the bottom of this track right there. There's my Contact instance. It doesn't really matter that it's sitting there. I'm happy that it's there. It's happy, and I'm good. So I'm going to Project, Add Tracks. I want MIDI tracks. I want 10 of them, which is a little extreme, but you'll get the idea. And again, you probably already understand how to do this, but it was sure new to me. So, all right, I'm going to take all these bad boys and I'm going to drag them in up here. Oh, somewhere where I can work quickly. This looks like a good spot. Okay, now I think I can match up this channel with this output. And as I click on this, it's showing it output 2. But I'm going to change that output channel to channel 1 because I had something on channel 1. I'm going to hit my speaker. And there we are. You'll notice there's a sound in the background. As I examine channel 1 real quick, it's probably some kind of French horn. Okay, rather nice French horn at that. I do like that Cinewind French horn. And so far so good. I've got one channel. I would probably take the time to write it in. And then copy that up here. And I'm going to keep doing that with everything here. And again, if you already know how to do this, well, then you're light years ahead of where I used to be. All right, so now notice this MIDI channel sitting here. I need to change this to channel 2. I've got channel 1 up here. Oops, right there, channel 1. I've got channel 2. Wonder how it sounds. Probably some sort of trumpet. Yeah, it sounds like I got a long trumpet here. Trumpet section, long notes. Channel 2, coming through just fine and dandy. I'm just going to abbreviate here. And I'll probably take that. I'll do one more of these and then I'm going to set the whole thing up and pause. And that will help in our presentation, I think, keep things moving. Okay, I've done some changing of my template at this point in time, and what I have done is line up the brass that I want. There's a bunch of stuff here that, frankly, I don't need at this moment, so I'm just going to hide all that stuff. Hide selected tracks. Now, all I have here are my, say my brass tracks for my template, and course, being a person that wants to make them look pretty and all, I guess I'll give them a little bit of a brassy color. Alright, let's go ahead and do this whole thing in one shot. If I can, this will all be brass. And I'm hitting the shift key and I'm tapping right here, and then I go over to kind of a nice little brassy color. No, that wasn't too nice to me. Well, so be it. I'm sure there's a faster way. Yeah, there is a faster way if you just come up here and click that there, and then you're all set. There's my brass ready to go. I suppose if I want this sitting in my folder, it doesn't hurt to place it in the folder, and so my instance and all my instruments are set there in my rack for now. And I should be a pretty happy camper now, no matter what I want to play. If I want to play my tuba, here we go. Where in the world did the tuba go? Or my trombone short, or my trombone low, or my, let's see, trumpet phrases. So, my brass template's basically all set and good to go. Now, as I look then at my mixer, we're good to go here. Probably I'd want an EQ for every setting, and there are different ways of doing that. and you probably, the question wasn't really about EQ, but anyway, there's part of my template. Let me show you a different template that's a little bit bigger. I'm going to move this across so you can see my template. There's a bunch of stuff I'm not using, and I'm sure there's a way to hide it. And guess what? I haven't figured out that trick yet. I've got a couple things on the end here that don't need to be where they are. But anyway, that's this little template. Let me show you a bigger one. Here's a picture of my big template, and I don't really have the resources to run it, but you can see what I've done. I've kind of put my percussion together here, followed by my strings, some of the strings that I'm using at the moment, followed by my woodwinds, and, well, no, actually this was more some synthesizer type settings. Here we have my brass template, my woodwind template, a couple of choirs that I like to use out of East-West. And then what I've got are some stems here. It's not fully developed because I'd like to develop an orchestral library stem area, but this is in development for me. But for instance, if I do some library music, there are typically a couple of pianos that I would make library music out of. Let's say it was an emotional track, I'd probably go with pianos. And I may want to be able to treat them differently as I export these stems for mixing purposes. My percussion are grouped into percussion high, percussion mid, percussion low. My keyboard instruments like mallets, sacrotalis being high, vibraphones being more low, marimba. Strings high and long I would treat a certain way in mixing versus strings high and short. My reverbs would be a little shorter for those long notes, and and then definitely shorter for the short notes, just to make them cut through the mix a little bit. I have low strings, and I'm not going to put near as much reverb on those low strings because of the harmonic series to begin with. I'm going to treat the harp a little bit like I might treat a classical guitar. High brass, long sounds, high brass, short sounds, low brass, long sounds, low brass, short sounds. I would tend to treat those similar in my ultimate mix. So I don't need 20 different stems or 150 different stems of music going out when I could just deal with a group that really sound really good at this stage of the game pre-mix, and then it exported for some finishing mixing touches. And you can kind of see the basic layout here. High, woodwinds high long, high short, woodwinds low short, woodwinds low long. It probably doesn't have to be quite that specific. I might treat the runs a certain way. I may treat certain hits a certain way. Matter of fact, if I need another stem, I'll just make it. There would be effects that are long and high and effects that are low. A couple of different areas for if I might want to treat my synthesizers differently. I've got several different choirs here, and I may just export them as they are. Boys choir, women's choir, men's choir, mixed choir, so that I have some flexibility when I get to the mixing screen as to how I would deal with them. And when it comes to the mixing part of it, I would go up here and I would export in Cubase. I would export a certain audio mix down. I'm going to export those stems. I don't need the instruments themselves. My group channels right here, this is what I would export. So I'm going to hit group channels. It's going to send all those group channels exporting out. If I felt that I needed a particular instrument set out for some reason because of something that was going on with it that was particularly cool, let's say I wanted the tubular bells, then sure, I could export that and give it a little different treatment in the mix. And then, of course, I just hit my export button and it's all heading out where I can retrieve it for mixing purposes in my mixing template. Now, here's a case where I have set up a certain export, boys choir, ladies choir, violin solo, high strings, low strings, and so on, different combinations of instruments, high brass, long, low strings short, low strings, a certain run that I had going. And I just play a little of this. But again, these are all waves. It loaded really fast, which is quite nice. And sounds a little bit like this. I'm just going to pause that for a second. Notice how all my stems are showing up here. I've got quite a bit going. I've got an equalization. I used some VSL and some presets that they have. So I used, I believe, probably a preset for a choir here.